All right. So this is the sixth in the series of the Vedanta talk, and today we'll cover a rather interesting subject. What is Atman? So when I go, I will kind of just recap what we have done in the earlier 5 sessions. So then this will become very clear. What is Jiva? What is Sakshin? What is Atman? What do these terms refer to? We've all heard of this. हम साक्षिन हैं, हम जीवा हैं, आत्मन हैं. So what's the meaning of these terms is what we'll cover in this talk. So just to recap, what is Vedanta? Vedanta is an inquiry into reality. So, human beings have this innate urge ki I am a small person on this earth, but there's this whole huge earth and there's stars and skies and cosmos. What is the relationship between me and the cosmos? So that is one inquiry. What happens to me after I die? Is there a God? Is there some supernatural being who is controlling all this? So these are questions which are natural to human beings, and Vedanta is a very structured inquiry into those questions. So philosophy in general, it asks, are the objects that we see, are they real? So this computer which is in front of you, my voice which you're hearing, are these real, or is there something more to it? And Vedanta observes that there are objects, which our senses perceive, what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you touch. So there are objects, and there is a subject within that perceives that object. So there are two things. There's object and a subject. So Vedanta observes this through experience. And then it goes into a deeper analysis and understands that the objects are forever changing, they're impermanent. So if you look at the long term, we are all born, we grow in size, and then at some point in time we die. This happens to everything in the universe. If you look at a tree, in seasons, the tree will change, the leaves will shed, the leaves will come on, it will flower, it will fruit. So there's a constant changing. And if you listen to your scientists, they'll say that every atom molecule in your body is constantly changing. So this whole world of objects is ever changing. But Vedanta observes that the subject is unchanging. The consciousness is unchanging. It's the same unchanging consciousness which is the observer in your waking state, that is your current state, in your sleep state, when you're dreaming, and in your deep sleep state when you are in a dreamless sleep. And the same unchanging consciousness has a reality of its own. So that unchanging consciousness is the reality. So the entire Vedanta is about understanding this reality and trying to express it, because this understanding can come only through inner experience, but Vedanta tries to express it so that you get some understanding what this reality is. So this is the basic flow chart of Vedanta. And the main Vedantic ideas are Brahman, which is the underlying reality of everything that exists. And there is another idea of Ishvara. So Brahman, the underlying reality of everything that exists, is beyond space and time. So it is a substratum on which space, time, universe, world, you, I come and go. So that is Brahman. But within space and time, what is our highest reality? What is the highest individual, all our individual minds and consciousness, where does it coalesce? Is Ishvara. So it is within time and space. It is another way to look at it is Brahman descended into time space is Ishvara, right? Now, what explains that Brahman, which is the underlying unseen, formless, permanent reality, and this so-called, the world with forms, how does it happen? So this is explained by Maya. And a very uh, good example, which almost all Indian philosophies give to explain their point of view, is that of a rope and a snake. So the example is that you're walking on a road and you find there's actually a rope lying on the road, but you think it's a snake. It appears to you like a snake. So is the snake real or not real? That's the question. And different people answer that question differently. But basically, what Advaita Vedanta says, that the reality is the rope. The snake appears, the rope to you appears like a snake because of ignorance, because of avidya. And the moment you get vidya, that that's a rope, the snake disappears for you. It disappears. So that relationship between the appearance of the world is like the snake, and Brahman is like the rope. And why it appears like a snake is explained by Maya. So we have gone through all this. I don't want to, I'm just summarizing it. And the reason, what's the Maya is sustained by avidya. That, you don't know the reality of Brahman. You don't know the rope. And therefore, your mind projects the appearance of the world or the appearance of the snake in this example. And Atman is nothing but the same Brahman individualized. So the Brahman component within you and me individually is Atman. So Aham Brahmasmi. So Atman is equal to Brahman. And in this talk, we will be talking about the last point, really. But to continue with the summary, this Brahman which we have talked about, which is the underlying reality, is not a point in time and space. You cannot, like how you can say, okay, so that is the continent of America, or that is the people tree. You cannot say, oh, that is Brahman. Or you can't even point inwards and say, oh, that is Brahman. So it's not a point in space-time. It is, space-time is contained in Brahman. Space-time is also an appearance. I mean, there's a very deep philosophical inquiry in Svetaswatra Upanishad, in Nagarjuna interpreting the Buddha, where they've said even time and space is empty. So space-time is also part of the Maya, is part of the appearance. So the Brahman is not in space-time. And therefore, if you were to put it in language, you can say Brahman is simultaneously nowhere and simultaneously everywhere. It's very difficult to explain. All right. But the point is that nothing in this world of objects has self-reality. What is self-reality? Nothing has lasting independent nature of its own. So every object is in this whole cycle of cause and effect. So something caused, the seed caused the tree to appear. All right. So everything has a cause and nothing has self-reality. Nothing, the tree doesn't have any independent nature of its own. It's a dependent thing. It's dependent on the tree. It is dependent on other objects around it, soil and water and so on and so forth. It is dependent on for its reproduction to bees and other insects. So everything it doesn't have any independent, lasting, unborn, undying nature of its own. And the only thing which has a self-reality is Brahman, which is the underlying reality of it all. It is the rope. So it is the underlying reality on which things appear and disappear. So it's what people who have gone into meditation and samadhi, they come out and they say it's like a space of awareness. It's just a space of awareness, and in that awareness things are appearing and disappearing like a dream, like a construction, like a fabrication. Things are appearing and things are disappearing. It's just a plain space of awareness. And that plain space of awareness is expressed as Nirguna Brahman. That means Brahman without attributes. And as I said, that when Brahman descends into time space, that the conscious principle descends into time space, the highest conscious principle is called Saguna Brahman. What are you doing? Really? So Brahman descended in time space is called Saguna Brahman. So that Brahman has got attributes. That Brahman, that Saguna Brahman is also part of Maya. So when Pralay comes, even the Ishvara, what we call Ishwar, will also disappear. So it's not permanent. It doesn't have an independent nature of its own. It is Brahman, which has descended into time and space. And when time and space collapses in Pralay, even Ishvara will go away. And what is the relationship between reality and the world is expressed by Maya. So Brahman, as we saw, is, and it is at the same time is not identical with the world. It is identical with the world because the world is not apart from Brahman. That's why it's called Advaita. Dvait nahi hai. They're not two. Brahman and the world are not two. The rope and the snake are not two. The rope is appearing like a snake. The snake is not different from the rope. So it is identical because they are not two. But it's also not identical because the world is changing. The snake will disappear. Once you know there's a rope, the snake will not cease to exist. But the rope will continue. So it is not identical because unlike Brahman, the world is always changing. And this paradox, which is inexplicable, you cannot explain this, why this is so, why the world appears. You cannot, it's an axiom. As long as Brahman is, as long means the Brahman has always been there. So Brahman and Brahman, that means the whole universe, has always been there from beginningless time. Why that is so, we don't know. We cannot explain. And that paradox has been given the word Maya. Very loosely illusion, but it is basically Maya means to manifest the unmanifest. Now, so that was the summary of the earlier talks. Now we'll get into Jiva. So here we will distinguish three terms. One is Jiva, one is Atman, and one is Chitta. And in this combination, we will understand what is Jiva. So Jiva is the individual being. Each of us are a Jiva. So there is a term called Chitta. So Chitta is basically mind plus ego. So when I say my name is Atul, I am giving this talk, there's a combination of my mind and there's a combination of my self-identity. I am giving this talk. I live in Bangalore. So this self-identity plus my mind together is what is called the psychological I. And this is the Chitta. But when I die, my mind mind is also made of matter. It's made of subtle matter, but it's still made of matter. So it is insentient. Everything, the only conscious principle is Brahman. So everything else is insentient. And what it means, it doesn't have any light of its own. It has got no self-reality. We saw what self-reality was. It's got no self-reality. So where does the intelligence come from? That comes from Atman. So what happens is that how do you perceive an object? So you see a flower, and your senses bring the signal of the flower into your mind, right? Mind is a very, very reflective surface, like a mirror, and the flower is like reflecting on in the mind. But somebody has to see it. Who will see it? So your Atman puts light on it. And once the Atman puts light on it, then you see the flower. Without the Atman, like, for example, a person who is dead also has eyes. But you dangle a rose in front of a dead person, the person will not see it. Because Atman has left the body. Okay. So Chitta, which is the mind, plus the ego, plus the Atman is Jiva. So Chitta plus Atman is equal to Jiva. So Chitta is the instrument, the mind instrument. It is the sense of psychological I, and plus the intelligence is equal to Jiva. Now this Jiva is the Kartar. It's the doer of all actions. And the Bhoktar, meaning it kind of is the enjoyer or sufferer of the fruits of action. And in this drama of all these things which we do and we enjoy and we suffer, you were talking about Chinta. So it is all the drama which is happening, the Atman remains very detached. It's unattached, it is untainted. In fact, once Swami Chinmayananda called it in a lighter vein. He says the unholy alliance between mind and Atman. So the Atman itself is not tainted. Atman itself is not the Kartar or the Bhokta. The Atman in conjunction with the Chitta is the Kartar and Bhokta. But the Atman remains untainted. Atman doesn't suffer. Atman remains untainted, detached, and you have the feeling of either enjoying or suffering. It appears to you that you are feeling of enjoying or suffering more from your own psychological I point of view. So there's a very nice shloka in the Shvetasvatara Upanishad and the Mandukya Upanishad, in fact. And this picture on your screen, it says there are two birds, two sweet friends who dwell on the same tree. One eats the fruits and the other looks on in silence. So whatever we're talking about, the Jiva is the bird which is, doing all the action and eating the fruits. And the other bird, which is the Atman, is just looking. So the tree symbolizes the body and the world, and the bird signifies Jiva and Sakshin. So Atman in its role as a Sakshin. And they have lived together from the very beginningless time. They've always been together. As I said, Brahman is beginningless, and therefore the world is also beginningless. There's no point in time where you can say the world was created. It's always been there. Why it has been there, we don't know. We explain it by Maya. They have lived together from beginningless time. And the Jiva, which identifying with the body, becomes finite. And once it becomes finite, it seeks happiness, completeness by fulfilling its desires. Because it's finite, it has desires, and the desires have to be fulfilled. So it does action to fulfill the desires. And that's represented by the bird who eats the fruits. So some are sweet, some are bitter. But the Atman is just observing. Now the Jiva, all of us, we have forgotten that Atman is our friend. However, Atman has not forgotten us. It knows that we are there. It is observing. It is a witness to the restlessness of the constant activity of the Jiva, but it's not involved in the actions, nor in its fruits. Some time will come, you listen to this talk and you explore more, you have a guru, you go into meditation, whatever happens, you at some point realize that it's so fruitless to pursue desires. This is a whole another story of its own. If you have a desire and you fulfill it, it begets more desires. If you have a desire, you don't fulfill it, you are unhappy. So whichever way you look at it, if you have more desires, then this action goes on and on and on. And you realize that, the wise people realize that pursuing desires is absolutely fruitless, right? And then they get onto the path, how do I get out of this desires? So that puts them onto the path to end this finiteness. That puts them on the spiritual path. They become a seeker. And what is the relationship between the Atman and the Jiva? We saw, I explained, it is as inexplicable as between Brahman and the world. It is same as the rope and the snake. It is inexplicable. It's part of Maya. It is inexplicable. And now coming back to Atman and Brahman are, as I said, are the same. They're two labels of the same reality. Brahman is, the term is used to describe the underlying reality of everything, while Atman is the same principle which is used to describe the underlying reality of a jiva, of an individual. But is there any difference? There's no difference. So it is like air in a room is the same as the air outside the room. So if you break the walls of the room, the air will merge with the Brahman, with the air outside. So similarly, Atman and Brahman are the same thing, but within the individual, it is referred to as Atman, and in general, underlying all reality, all the universe, it is referred to as Brahman. Everything in the world actually is like a rainbow. So there's a, if you see a rainbow, there's a sky outside, which is the reality. Let's think of the sky outside as sky behind the rainbow as Brahman, right? And a rainbow appears. It looks very vivid and, it looks very attractive, but actually it is empty. It's got no self-reality, no reality of its own. So just like that, the world is very vivid. It's very real, appears very real, but in reality, it is empty. And the only self-reality is, in this example, rainbow example, the sky. In the example of the world, it is just that clear light of awareness. Vedanta refers to the Chid Akasha, or Atman, or Brahman. It is nothing but just pure awareness. And Jagat, the rainbow and the sky are not two things. Something has happened, some chemical reaction happened in the sky to form the rainbow. So Jagat and Brahman are also not two things. That is why this philosophy gets its name Advaita, not two, not two. They say that, well, there is appearance. There is a rainbow and there is a sky, yes, but they're not two. The rainbow is an appearance. The sky is a reality. Now we just go into two other ideas, karma and moksha, and we will end today's session. Avidya, ignorance begets karma. What happens is if you you mistake a rope for a snake, that that mistaken apprehension of the snake propels you into some action. You run away, you go try to kill the snake, whatever you, some action will be propelled by the perception that the rope is actually a snake. So this is avidya, this is ignorance. And the moment you are ignorant, you don't identify yourself as the Atman, you identify yourself as the body mind. You identify yourself as a rainbow and not the sky. And then you have to sustain this body mind, you have to sustain the rainbow. So that gets you into action. And every action, every time you act, the result of that action gets imprinted in your mind. It's called samskara. It vasanas or samskara. It gets imprinted in your mind. And that will lead you to more desires and more action. So it's a constant cycle. Desire, action, more desire, action, more desire, action. And this will not only in this lifetime, but when you die also, your mind survives death. It has got all those impressions, and then you'll be reborn, because you will have to fulfill those desires. So you'll come back to fulfill some more desires. And this is an endless, endless, endless cycle. But when you have jnana, when you through samadhi, through enlightenment, when you realize that the world is a rainbow, then you stop acting with desire. Then this desire goes away, because you have tasted the ultimate joy and happiness and bliss. So nothing in this world is going to give you more bliss. There's no desire for ice cream. There's no desire for anything. It's not that you're a human body, so you will indulge, you will eat, you will, chat with friends, you'll go out, you'll see a movie, whatever. But there's no desire. So it is action. You're performing action without desire. When you perform action without desire, no new karmas are being added. So then you will live as long as your old karmas, the river of karmas, just run out. So once the river of karma runs out, then you are free from the cycle of birth and death. You are out of samsara. Finally, moksha. And if you notice, the picture I've got is just a blank space, because moksha cannot be picturized. What is moksha? Moksha is when all thought is destroyed. Your mind doesn't exist anymore. So we saw that, when you see a rose, the rose is reflected in your mind, and Atman lights up that reflection, and that's how you get knowledge of the rose. Now imagine through meditation samadhi, the mind is taken off. So it's Atman directly perceiving the rose. How the Atman will perceive the rose is very different from how the mind will perceive the rose. The mind will perceive the rose in its name and form. It's got petals, red color, this smell. That is the kind of perception mind will do. When you take the mind away, the Atman will perceive the rose as what the rose actually is, the underlying reality of the rose. The Atman will perceive the rose as itself, as Brahman. All right. So it is moksha happens when all thought is destroyed. There's no thought, there's no mind, and the Atman is directly, gets a sense of itself, that it is the clear light of awareness. And you don't develop into this. This state is always there. Atman is always there in you. It is just veiled by avidya. The moment the mind is destroyed, all logic, thought is gone, avidya is gone. You then become your being. You get absorbed in your own beingness of Atman. And this requires great courage. To the very enlightened people who talk, they say that It requires great courage to uh, go into moksha, because it means completely ceasing to be who you are. Your entire ego is not there. Your mind is not. You have ceased to be, and you're merged with totality. You don't exist anymore. And this is why the Buddha used the term nirvan. Nirvan means to extinguish. Your whole mind ego is extinguished. Your mind ego doesn't exist anymore. You're just that awareness. I mean, even when I say you are just that aware, even that is wrong. Your mind ego is completely gone. You as the individual you knew yourself as and everybody else knew yourself doesn't exist anymore. So it's like the Ganga, which when it flows into the ocean, it stops being the Ganga. It's the ocean now. So that's it for today. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take it.